the most beautiful campus in New Zealand. There'll be New Zealand universities, but other campuses obviously have their attributes too in terms of tall, shiny buildings with glass and so on. But we've got lots of grass and lakes and flowers. And I urge you, if you have some time, either during lunchtime or after the end of the conference, to take a walk down through the main, right on the edge of the campus here. The main part is kind of that direction, and there's lots of other things to have a look at. I welcome you from the perspective of the Waikato Management School, and I'll raise some hackles with this as well. The #1 research ranked university and #1 research ranked business school in New Zealand, at least for the next month or two, Michael? Anyway, we're very pleased to be able to host this conference today, and I'd like to just ask Devashish, who has been the chair of the student committee, if you can.
Thank you very much for everybody coming here. I would like to thank my team members. One is August over there, Ting, and Amar is not here, I think. Yeah, thank you very much for all your help and coordinating this and being so supportive. Thank you very much and have a good time.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you for all of your committee's work in getting ready for this. It's been a lot of work actually in getting one of these things organized, but we're really pleased to see you all here on a very nice day. Now I'd like to introduce William Wang, who is the conference chair, and he'll say a few words and then introduce our keynote speaker.
Thanks, Doc, and welcome everyone to participate in the third New Zealand ICE Doctoral Consortium. We'll just start quickly, but still like to share a story about yesterday. Yesterday, I signed off 2 submissions on my PhD students. But before I sign it off, I asked one quick question. I said, well, normally finish something, you will have an exam. But then now I give you a small exam, and just one simple question. What do we mean by business information system? Well, that's the title of our department. Well, definitely because once you graduate, you need to know the definitions. You're going to tell people, you're going to explain what you mean by information system. And that is hardware, software, procedures, and data. And what would be the last one? The last one, yeah, well, one of my PhD students hasted a little bit. Then I told him straightforward, that's people. And now it's the time for you, because you're not only doing research your own, you're not going to dig into the usage of IT or software or data or whatever. You're going to meet with people. And in this very representing place, the Morai of New Zealand Morai. And then this will be your wonderful experience that you can be proud that you have studied doctoral degrees in New Zealand, whether you are domestic or international students. Okay, now I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Mike Myers from the University of Auckland. He's going to share with us about publications. Thanks.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be the speaker. What I'd like to talk about is you being, well, most of you being PhD students, not the faculty, but the PhD students. What are you going to do afterwards when you finish? Or what's your plans? And I suppose most people, when they finish a PhD at least, think of becoming an academic. Not all of you will, but perhaps most of you will. So how are you going to get that job? How are you going to get that first job? And how are you going to build this academic career? So that's what I thought I would focus on today. So first of all, I'll tell you a bit about my own career, a very short synopsis. Then I'll talk about getting an academic position. How do you get that first job? Not, I mean, a continued or continuation or tenure, that sort of job, a lecturer. Then talk about getting published. And lastly, becoming a research active scholar, which I think is what really being an academic is all about. It's becoming a research active scholar. What does that mean? And so I'll talk about that. So first of all, a brief biography. I used to play guitar a long time ago. In fact, I used to come to Hamilton back in the 70s at the Hillcrest Tavern. We were a regular feature there. But not sure you can see which one is me there. I suppose the photo is not that great, a bit of a light on it. Anyway, there it is. The one, the handsome one, that's great. Dead right. Exactly. actually, that's me there. The skinny one, oh, it's skinny. Play guitar, the lead guitar. We're on a TV show, on TV1. We had a regular rock and roll show. And this guy here, some of you might recognise, Paul Holmes. He was the he was set in a nightclub, he was the compere. So it was about 6 shows. Anyway, that's what in my sort of student days. Then I did a PhD in anthropology and actually Vanuatu, did ethnography, worked for IBM, and then for the last 20 years or so have been at the University of Auckland. I'm now head of department, so I am involved in hiring people nowadays, hiring new lecturers and associate professors and so forth, and was president of AIS for 1 year. Now it's on the council.
Good job.
Yeah, you're on the council at the time. Now, been very lucky, I suppose. I've been able to have lots of publishing experience, publishing lots of journals, lots of editorial experience as a reviewer, editor, and so forth of lots of our good journals. So I've got lots of experience in doing that, fortunately, and I'll share with you some of my secrets of success, I suppose, in this short presentation. So that's me, that's my brief background. Now I'll talk about getting your first academic journal. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same right throughout New Zealand, but we have this standard workload formula for all lecturers: 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% what we call service. So research is sort of, I suppose we would say, PBRF-able type stuff, like research outputs, peer esteem, and that sort of stuff. The teaching, that's obviously your courses that you teach, and we measure that nowadays. We have student evaluations, and people have got to get more than, to get tenure or continuation, you get more than 70% students agreeing, or strongly agreeing that you're a good teacher and your course is good, that sort of thing. But then there's also service, and that could be things like reviewing for journals, editing journals, organising this consortium would be a service type activity, or doing internal stuff like being on a postgraduate committee or organising careers events. All of that sort of stuff is we call service. And actually I think that's very important, because that's part of being a research active scholar, is doing those things. And that to me is part of it. And now here's the bad news, that the PhD that you're all working on now is necessary but not sufficient. And it's even worse than that, when you've, actually an anthropologist did a study in the US of people that had just joined a university with their brand new PhD and they're just starting their new jobs. And he studied what actually happened. And what he found was that the existing faculty in the new job weren't interested in the PhD at all of the person that had just come. Not interested. Which is surprising, isn't it? You think that they should be. But no, they weren't. What they were interested in was their new stuff, what their articles that were going to be producing, their new things they were doing. That's what they were interested in. So this is my message for today, is that doing a PhD is good. You're learning to do research. You're learning what it takes to, find out literature, find out what people are doing, how to do certain research methods. You're doing certain findings, and that's all really good. You're learning these really important skills. But my message for today is that that is necessary but not sufficient. That if you just focus on your own little world, your own little PhD, I don't think you'll get a job. You really have to be what I think of as a research active scholar. That is the thing. And so, actually, I know some of my students are not here today. Why not? From Auckland, I mean, at the University of Auckland. Well, a lot of people think, well, I'm really too busy. I'm too busy to come to an event like this. I'm too busy to review for journals. I'm too busy to do these other things. I've got to focus on my own work. So they spend all their time just focusing on their own little world, their own little PhD. Big mistake. Big mistake. Because you learn more from coming to this sort of event in one day than you might learn for a whole month by yourself in the library or doing work by yourself. If you review an article for another journal, you learn far more by reading what other people have done than just to do it yourself. So that's my message for today, is that PhD is necessary but not sufficient. And if you want to get a job, you have to become this research active scholar. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing, so all I'm going to talk about now is not really teaching, because that's not focused for today, we're focusing on PhD. Teaching is really important, of course, absolutely crucial. You need those good scores, so I'm taking that for granted now. What I'm focusing on now is getting published and becoming this research active scholar. That's the bit I'm focusing on now. So it's always good actually to do some teaching as well. If you're a PhD student, it's good to do some lecturing, or if you can do that, that's great. Not too much, but enough to get some experience. So now in the PBRF we have these things, we define, New Zealand system defines research active as three things. It's research outputs, that's articles and stuff, or thesis is a research output. Software can be output. Peer esteem, and what we call contribution to research environment. So that's actually one thing I like about the PBRF. It's not just focusing on people who are just being selfish, just doing their own thing. It also, an important part of it is this: what have you contributed? What have you contributed to other people? Like running this doctoral consortium. William spent some time organising this. He could have just spent more time writing his own article, but instead he did this. Well, I think that's fantastic. It's a contribution to the environment. So that's what the third one is. So I quite like that item there. But of course in the PBRF, 70% is on the first one, research outputs. So, so that's the most important thing. Now why is that? Well, really, when you think about it, how many people are going to read your PhD? 2.
Not including you.
Not including you. Or your mum, right? Yeah, a few people. That's it. The examiners. The oral examiner, the external, hopefully your supervisor. You didn't think your supervisor's going to read, eh? maybe not, right? Yeah, at least 2 anyway. Maybe 3, 4 if you're lucky, right? Really. But if you publish your work, imagine you spend all this work on your PhD, you spend 3 years at least, 4, 5, whatever it is, and then that's all that happens. Just a few people read it. That's sad, isn't it? Isn't it a pity? Wouldn't it be better to publish it so that other people can then read it and they can learn from what you've done? So that's the beauty of publishing. Other people can learn what you've done. And then what I find people get, my colleagues get really excited about is when people start using your work, then building on it. That's really quite a buzz when people start using your work to progress knowledge in a field. So publication allows people to learn from it. It contributes to a body of knowledge. One image I have, one metaphor I have, is like a jigsaw puzzle. I think of a discipline like a jigsaw puzzle. IS is a big jigsaw puzzle. And at the moment, we've completed part of the puzzle. Of course, it's a moving puzzle. But some bits are filled in. We know a lot about database. We know a lot about enterprise systems now. And there's a lot of things that we know about. But there's other things that sort of we haven't quite completed yet. Like there's a lot of stuff about social networking we need to learn, and a whole lot of new stuff. Mobile systems and so forth. So what you can do is fill in a piece of that jigsaw puzzle with your PhD. You fill in a little bit. And then once you complete it, okay, now someone else can join their piece onto that same puzzle. But of course, if you don't publish an article from your PhD, what happens? There's a gap there. That piece is not actually filled in. It's sitting in the library and no one can find it. You've got to get the piece out of the library and actually put it on the jigsaw puzzle. And that's what an article does. It fills it in. So then someone else can then put their piece in. Otherwise, someone's got to make another little piece. You know, they've got to fill in the same bit. Anyway, so it contributes to this body of knowledge, this big jigsaw puzzle, which of course is a moving thing. It's not like a static puzzle that keeps moving. But the other thing about a PhD proves you can do research, but a publication does that too. It proves you can do it, that you can contribute to this field. And it shows that your work is of value to others. It's proof, isn't it? If you get your PhD accepted by this university, by Waikato, it's a stamp, isn't it? There's a seal there, a stamp on the thing saying, yes, you've done it. Same with an article, where you get that acceptance letter. Hopefully it's acceptance, not rejection. But you get the acceptance letter, finally, after 3 goes. Yes, we've accepted your paper. Fabulous. It proves that you can do it. I have, I always think of conquering journals. I always like it when I first get an article in a new journal. I think, right, I've conquered that one now. So, Aegis was one I hadn't done for a long. I hadn't done at all until recently, and then I finally got in. Finally, I've conquered Aegis now. So, I was quite pleased about that. So I sort of like to conquer them. That's my sort of metaphor. I've got that now. Now, of course, as a PhD student, you can spend your time on lots of things. You've got 3 years or 4 years ahead of you. You think, wow, I've got all this time. Not really. Actually, it goes pretty quickly. And there's all these things you can publish in. You can do all sorts of things. Newspaper articles, books, conference proceedings, and so forth. Now, these are all good. Conference proceedings is fantastic. I always encourage my students to go to conferences. But for PPRF purposes and for getting an academic job, the most important one is the academic peer-reviewed journals. That's what really counts in most universities. And we do count conferences too, but in some places out there, they don't even look at conferences, like in the US and UK and Europe. They don't really regard conferences that highly anymore. Journal articles are the thing. And then we have PPRF in New Zealand. Of course, we have the Australians being Business Dean's Council list in Australia, which we use in our business school. They're all ranked and so forth. Tenure process in the US only really looks at the peer-reviewed journal articles. And my advice is that you should try to publish, if you can, in the most highly ranked journal possible. Now, not all my work goes into MIS Quarterly. Only very little of it goes in there. Most of it is not sort of good enough to get there. But you should try at least to get it in the highest one you can. Don't aim low. Now, what do I mean by high? Well, there's various ranking systems. People disagree about what's high and what's low. But there's various ones you can use. I would say when you apply for a job, use the best one that suits you. So if you're in the AIS basket of 6 or 8, it's now, they've got a list of the AIS journals. Well, say I got in one of these AIS basket of 8. If your A star is a bit more generous, as per the Australian Business Dean's Council, will then say, I've got an A star journal. If you're more selective, and like some US universities only use like the UT Dallas list or the Financial Times list of top journals, whatever it is, there's a whole lot of lists out there. You choose the one that suits you, but at least go for the ones that are as high as you possibly can. Anyway, that would be my advice. Don't aim low. Now, why is that? Well, because the peer review process, by definition, is a social process. It's what other people think. I might think I'm brilliant. I might think I'm a Nobel Prize winner. But if I can't convince anyone else I'm brilliant, there's a problem there. Maybe I am, no one else understands me. In fact, that's what happened with my first article. I remember I sent it to ISR, and it got rejected. And that was my very first academic article, and it rejected it. And I was really annoyed. I said, these people don't understand what I'm doing. That's what I said. And I was really angry. Now I look back on that and I say, gee, whose fault was that? That they didn't understand my article. Whose fault was it? No, it was mine. Not theirs. It was my fault. I was quite immature, now, I look back on it, quite immature. I was younger, of course, 20 years younger, so I guess I've grown a bit now. But nowadays I don't react that way with reviews. I might get angry for a day, but that's about it. Then I move on. Now, the thing is that the review process varies from virtually nil. In fact, there's some places you can pay to get your article published, and there are some of those around, unfortunately. Value to your career is zero. In fact, probably less than zero, probably negative. To very tough. And so the defining feature of a top journal is, as a general rule, not always the case, but my experience is, the tougher the review process, that is the tougher it is to get in, the more highly ranked it is. It's easy to get into lower, that's the general rule. So, so the defining feature of these top journals is their review system. They have, top scholars that are reviewing for them. It's very hard to convince them that you've got something new. That's the hard part. Very hard to convince them you've got a new idea. I've heard it all before. So that's one problem. It can be a bit like this. It can be battered and bruised, and so that can be your experience. So, how can you avoid getting battered and bruised and avoid getting rejected all the time? By the way, one interesting thing I found is that the people that publish the most get rejected the most. I get rejected all the time. That was my first lesson, actually, when I went on sabbatical, my very first sabbatical. I went to see Lynn Marcus. I was at Claremont. She was the leading qualitative researcher right at that time, or still is, in the early 90s. And she came roaring out of her office. She was really angry that these reviewers had rejected her article. I was surprised. I thought, wow, here's Lynn Marcus, this sort of wonderful, fabulous scholar. Surely she doesn't get any articles rejected. And it was just the opposite. What I found was that she gets her stuff rejected all the time. But she doesn't stop there. She revises it and sends it off. A day later, it's gone. She's done it. Or maybe not quite a day, but probably takes a few weeks. But she doesn't wallow in her sorrows for too long. She gets on with the job and revises it. And that was one interesting lesson for me. But what are the strategies? Well, first of all, make sure you have an interesting topic. That's key. Now, what does interesting mean? Well, it can be, first of all, it should be definitely interesting to you. That's obvious. But you know what you find interesting, other people might find boring. Now, you might like rugby and someone else doesn't like rugby, But they might hate it. But you have to find interesting, your supervisor, and by coming to this sort of event, it's a social process. As I said, peer review is a social process. So if you're early in your PhD career and you wander around here today, you chat to people about your PhD, and you find everyone just, then you know you've got to change your topic. You need to do something else. On the other hand, if you find that suddenly people start, Bob starts perking up, now tell me more about that. Wow, that sounds great. You know you're onto something. Now you know you've got an interesting topic. So that's the test today. If people start yawning during your presentation, maybe you should change the topic. But if people are interested, then you know you're onto the right thing. Because the thing is, it's a peer review. If people are bored now, imagine what happens when you send it to the reviewers. Or your examiners, they'll be bored as well. So it's best to get something interesting. Of course, you've got to do the work. I'm sure your supervisors can make sure you do that. You've got to do the hard work. There's you can't get away from doing the literature review and doing the research properly. I'm not talking about that today. You've got to do the hard yards of the. If you're doing qualitative research, you've got to do do the interviews and all that sort of thing. There's no excuse for doing that poorly. So with quantitative, you've got to do the survey properly or the experiment, whatever it is. I'm assuming you're doing that properly. But this one is a key too. Attend good conferences where research is presented because it's a social process. Talk to people. Like now, this event, fabulous. You know, so attend, PAXs or ACES or conferences that maybe are in your particular subject area, because it's by talking to people that you learn about what other people are doing. You get feedback on your own, and you show. There's this phrase, iron sharpens iron. It's from the Bible actually. Iron sharpens iron. The idea is by that's how you sharpen a knife, isn't it? Actually, with and that's the same thing. By presenting your ideas here, the 3-minute thing we had last night. The more times you do the 3-minute presentation of your PhD, the better every time you get at saying what it's about. So by the end of your PhD, you should have, as William said, you should have it off pat. And be able to explain your research to other people quickly and succinctly. That's a great skill. Asked to be a reviewer. Now this is one thing that always surprises me. PhD students are nowhere near aggressive as they should be in asking to be reviewers for conferences and journals. PhD students think, as I said before, I'm too busy. I've got to teach this class, I've got to work on my own PhD thesis and that's it. Big mistake, big mistake. I found over the years that the more, I probably review heaps of things. Senior editor of the Quarterly, I was getting one paper a week, 50 papers a year, handling. It's a huge amount of work. But the more papers you read, the better you get at writing your own papers. It's counterintuitive. You think, oh no, I haven't got time to do this. I've got to work on my own stuff. The problem is, but it's counterintuitive. If you actually spend more time reviewing other people's work, you get better and much smarter at writing your own. So it's actually counterintuitive. So you're much better off doing this. It saves you time in the long run. And then of course, one thing I think is, because it is a social process, it is very hard, I think, for PhD students and junior faculty to do this by themselves. There are lots of unwritten rules that are not explicitly in the call for papers of journals. There's a whole lot of norms, there's a culture of how you respond to reviewers and what you should do. There's a whole lot of stuff there that PhD students, it takes you a while to learn. It's taken me a long time to learn it. And therefore, I strongly recommend all of you should co-author with your supervisor or other colleagues, normally your supervisor, because they will have gone through this process. And because you can easily make simple mistakes. For example, you just send your paper to the wrong track. It's a simple mistake. And yet, if you send it to the wrong track of a conference, it's very easy to do. Then you get the wrong reviewers, they don't know what you're doing, you just get rejected. Simple. And you've wasted all that time. Just a few knowledge about who's there, what the conference is, who the people are, can make all the difference. And then how you respond to reviewers as well. Some simple things that your supervisor will know what to do, what not to do. How to respond to reviewers, and so forth. So I don't insist, with any of my students, I don't insist they should co-author with me, because I think it's unethical to say they have to. It's their free choice, their work, their free choice. But realistically, I think if they want to get published in a good journal, it's very hard for them to do it by themselves. It's quite difficult, I think. And it can get quite disillusioning after a while, because if you start submitting your papers to journals, and one of my PhD students is like this actually, she's a more mature student. She's actually I would call her a BPM guru. And she's very bright, but she's submitted a lot of papers to conferences, but found it very hard to get them in. Some are, she's done some, but anyway, she's going to co-author with me now. She sort of realised, oh really, she really wants to work with me now, because after 3 years she's realised it's too hard to do it by yourself. So, that would be my advice, is to need to get published, because the PhD is not sufficient. Necessary, not sufficient. To get a job, you do really need these other outputs as well. Now some practical suggestions. I haven't got time to go into too much, but just quickly, each paper should have just one main point. Don't put your whole thesis into one paper, it doesn't work. Just one main point per paper. Keep it focused. Try to improve it, like present here. That's my general rule, is try to present to a conference. There's some debate about proceedings and stuff, I won't go into that now. Send it to an appropriate journal. You can waste your time if you go too high, but don't go too low either. So that your supervisor can help with that. Go to an appropriate journal. Nominate people if you can, because it's a social process. You want people who will be able to evaluate your work properly. You know, you don't want to send if you've done some research on, let's say, business intelligence, you don't want to send it to someone who's done work on something else altogether. You know, say security. They've got to be what I call qualified reviewers. That is, people who know and have expertise to evaluate your own research. That's what you want. Actually, for your PhD examiners and editors' reviews, you want that. But then if it gets being rejected, actually there's one way to avoid being rejected. What's that?
Never submit at all.
Exactly. Never submit it. Guaranteed. That's the best way. But if you want to be an academic, better get used to being rejected. It's not very nice, but when I was an SE at the Quarterly, I was surprised that there was some, well, I thought really fantastic papers, really good papers, but the reviewers, 3 reviewers said, well, not really quite good enough for this journal. So 90% of the time I'm sending out rejection letters. Not very nice, but just the way it is. And what was interesting is that sometimes those people I'm sending rejection letters to would be top scholars, like the ones that we all think of, wow, these guys, I'd be sending them a rejection letter, say, sorry guys, this paper's been rejected, but guess what they would do? Within 6 months, they'd be back again, knocking at the door saying, we've revised it completely, this is a new paper, submit it again. And 2 of those people, well, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me naming them. Rudy Hirschel was one of them, and Dan Rowe was the other. Both of them had papers rejected by me. Both came back again 6 months later, and they got it the next time around. So these guys never give up. Now, this was Detmar Straub. He presented this recently at a Pax's conference, so I just thought I'd give you his lists of why they will accept your paper. So he said, this is kind of interesting, same as mine, exciting. The research questions are non-trivial, so there's some meat there. He said that the themes are popular, so like it's current now, like, you know, it's social networking, or something that's of interest now, it's not old stuff. It has theory, so you need theory in virtually all ICE journals nowadays. Applies to your methods, follows a formula. Now that's important, I think. You know, when I'm writing a new paper, I also have a template in mind. It's good to have a template. Follow the formula, follow the template. That's much easier. This is what positives work, which is what Detmar mostly does, not always, but usually, so it has a large sample. It doesn't counter the work of major movers and shakers. That was an interesting point, I think. That you don't go right against, you know, other people, because that's a tough one. You've got to have some really good arguments if you're going to do that. It covers the key literature, and then the last one was, it's clean. That's pretty obvious. So, fairly similar to mine, but I think that was Detmar's list. Now, I think, given the time, I think I'll skip this example. Is that all right? So, this was just a a struggle. Essentially what the story was it was a story of one of my early papers with Heinz Klein, and the amount of work it took to get this paper into the quarterly. And I was just going to go through all the reviews. Essentially, the short story is, we sent it to Alan Lee, who was the senior editor. He said, look, it's really not going to make it. It's too much like a textbook. It's not going to fly, and blah, 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 blah. So we had to revise the whole thing. More work, revise it again, more comments, basically 3 revisions before we got it through. So it's just a story of how we finally got it in. But I'll skip that now. So the last point then is becoming a research active scholar, because that, I think, is what I'm a head of department. I've hired a few people in the last few years, 2 assistant professors, professor, full professor, a lecturer, actually 2 lecturers. So we hire a few people. What do I look for? Well, one thing is the publications. Of course, the PhD is necessary. That's necessary, but not sufficient. Publications, or potential publications, and this is important too, is a research active scholar. Really, I'm sort of picking, I'm looking for, is this person going to be, because particularly if they're junior, but like a lecturer, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I'm guessing, is this person going to be a research active scholar longer term? So what do I look for? Well, the PBRF makes it sort of reasonably easy. It says, well, there's 3 categories. So, but how can I tell? Well, one thing I think is this one. Are you a loner, or are you collaborating with others? So I think, for example, we just hired one guy from NUS. What I found was he was collaborating and co-authoring with Bernard Tam, with other people. I thought, oh, that's good. He's collaborating with people. If he just be by himself, that to me is a negative, because research is a... So that was really good. The next thing was, does this person like doing research? Does he enjoy it? Does this person, he or she, enjoy it? Or is it a chore? Because there's, again, I can give an example from back in Auckland. There's one of my faculty members who's up for tenure. He actually didn't get it. He had an extension. And he came to see me just earlier this week, and he said, look, I'm really not enjoying doing research. I love teaching, but I don't enjoy the research. He's been trying, he's been struggling to get things into journals, but they're just not quite making it. It's just not quite there. And he says, look, it's sort of like, I'm the head of the department, right? I'm sort of whipping him over the thing, saying, look, do your research, get your articles out. And he's saying, I can't. And I'm not even liking it. He's spending his weekends and his holidays trying to write this stuff. And for him, it's just a chore. And I'm thinking, well, we have another category now, Auckland, called professional teaching fellow. That's someone who can do teaching and not research. So he's saying, look, maybe that's what I should do. And I'm saying, well, let's think about it for a while. Let's just see what happens with this baby submit and so forth. I don't want to just jump straight away, but let's think about this. But I think that's something for you to think about. Do you really enjoy learning about new stuff? Doing research? If you don't, then I think maybe being a lecturer is not really the right thing for you, I think. Maybe being a professional teaching fellow or teaching is better. Because to me, being an academic is all about this, being a research active scholar. I enjoy it. I love talking to you people and finding out what you're doing. I love going to conferences and talking to see what they're doing. And I've really enjoyed working with my colleagues, like Heinz Klein has passed away unfortunately in upstate New York. I used to go there and visit him for a few weeks. I love debating things with him and writing the paper, and I just enjoy it. To me, it's fun. So I don't need my dean to be beating over me the back saying, come on Mike, produce more articles. I don't need that, because I just do it. So it fits in with my personality. So I'd say you know, look at yourself and say, well, I'm doing this PhD, but do I really enjoy it? If you do, in fact, fantastic. That's great. If not, do something else. You know, I mean, my wife doesn't like research; she prefers to teach. She loves it. Fantastic. And this last one: are you engaged? Kind of the sort of buzzword for business schools is engagement nowadays. But I like that word, engagement. You know, are you engaged with the community of scholars? The fact that you're here today suggests to me that you are engaged. You want to be engaged. That's fantastic. In this IS New Zealand community. That's good. And I think it's the, you know, but there's a wider community out there as well. We should be engaged with the Australian, international community, Pacific Asia community. You know, we should be engaged as scholars with our, actually with our local communities as well, but with the IS community and as well. So, so in conclusion, publish your work in the best outlets possible, because a PhD is necessary but not sufficient. And in fact, in Auckland, we've recently changed our rules that now we've moved to what, well, students don't have to, but now we've just introduced the 3-paper thesis model. That now it's possible to get your PhD with 3 papers in, and we've defined them in our department at least as, they don't have to be published, but publishable. So we think that these 3 articles, and we're talking about 3 journal articles here, we think they are ready to submit. Some could have been published already, but they don't have to be. So they're 3 papers. So you can still do the traditional book, which people have done before, up until now, but you can also now do the 3 papers. And some of my new students will be doing the 3-paper model now. Because I think, personally, I think it's probably a better way to go. But, you know, I did the old model, so anyway. So, publish your work, get involved in the social system, and by coming here, you're doing that. But ask to review. You know, you should be asking, there's a few editors of journals here, and associate editors and so forth, in the faculty members here. You should be asking them, can I review a paper for you? That's what you should be doing. Get involved. And of course, collaborate, contribute, and lastly, persevere. When you get that rejection letter, okay, be angry for a day, but don't let it knock your confidence for too long. You know, talk to people about it. Because everyone gets rejected. Persevere. Because that's the key, I think, to getting it through. I mean, I've only given up on 1 paper ever. It was with one of my students, and we submitted to about 5 different journal outlets, and in the end I gave up and said, look, I'm sorry, I have to give up on this one. I still look back and think, I could have done it, you know, I could have got it through, but I finally gave up, but that's the only one. Every other one I've persevered to get it into somewhere, at least, would be my advice. Okay, so thank you.
Any questions? Perhaps we can allow 1 or 2 questions. Ready?
Yeah, thank you so much for this very historic presentation to me, because I used to see Dr. Meyer's papers, and it's a very good privilege for me to hear this. But the issue which I'm just thinking is in terms of the paradigm. When you are saying you are in the interpretive way of thinking, and a lot of journals which are A-class, they are more of the positivist type. So I don't know whether those are hidden guidelines or what. I'm just trying to see how do we get into such environment.
So you're doing qualitative interpretive research, are you?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think it's hard to get into any. First of all, it is hard to get your articles published, full stop, no matter what sort of research you're doing. So everyone finds it hard. Whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative, it's hard. It's hard work. That's the first point. The second point I would make is that almost all of the IS journals nowadays do have people as editors or senior editors or associate editors or reviewers who can review qualitative and interpretive work. So for example, there's someone at MISQ, there's someone at ISR, Aegis has ISJ has a few qualitative people as well. In fact, there are some journals that prefer qualitative research. In fact, ISJ, I suppose, used to almost prefer qualitative. Information Systems Journal, published by, used to be edited by David Avison and Gus Fitzgerald. So there are some outlets that you can go to, I think. The key is finding the right one that suits your work. So you've got to look at what sort of research you're doing. Now, who are the people, because this is the people thing, right? Who are the people that will be interested in this topic? And that's the key. So if there's no one there, like say if ISR all of a sudden, there's no one there that really handles interpretive research, there'd be no point in sending stuff there. There is actually at the moment, this Natalia Lavina is there, but otherwise you go somewhere else. So that's key.
ISJ is also an A-star journal by NZISDC. Any other questions? Well, maybe that you just talk to Michael probably later. We would like to express our thanks on behalf of the conference, and hopefully you have a lovely weekend after the conference. That's the bottom line. All right? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good luck with your career.
Thank you, Michael. Just some words of what's coming up. We'd ask you to move to the next sessions. Will be underway immediately, so there's no coffee break as such. Could you also turn off your cell phones or put them on silent and so on? Whoever that was beeping in the last session. Anyway, and the toilet facilities are, as was described last night, they're up under the tree here. Just up in this direction. So if you could decide which sessions you're going to, the staff that are here, could I ask the staff that are going to each of the sessions to sit in the front row, and we're going to get you to do a little bit of work in terms of providing comments to the presenters to the session. So if you can kind of sit up in front, we'll get you some details on that. I should mention in your registration package is a USB stick with all the proceedings on it, and that has full papers and the descriptions and so on. There's a piece of paper in your pack which also has a schedule. Okay, so if you can.
Which room is this?